Yo, what's going on, guys? Chris Bonner here, Overtime Athletes. For today's video, I wanted to make it about speed training for soccer, or how I would approach speed training for soccer. This is something that you guys in the comments have asked me about pretty frequently, so I figured I'd go ahead and address it. It's not the first sport, primary sport I work with, but I understand enough to be able to design a program. And here's how I would break down the components of speed that will translate over to you being faster on the soccer field or the football field. I know you guys call it football. Forgive us, in America, we call it soccer. So what I did was I broke down 4 different modalities. You can look at these as 4 different days. I would focus on them. I would do a 4-day split where 2 days are upper body, 2 days are lower body. That's traditionally how I like to set things up in an off-season training program. But I also work around the athlete, the amount of stress they have outside the weight room, how much practice they have, things of that nature. So just giving you a base phase. And then what I would do is I'll break it down into 4 different categories. And what I'll do is I'll kind of go over each one of those. So my approach to, translating over any kind of something like speed or power or something of that nature is to isolate and elevate that component, right? To make you a better soccer player, me as a strength and conditioning coach, especially when it comes to speed training, I'm trying to isolate a particular component to what you're doing and elevate that component to then translate over to movements that you would do on the actual field. So for the first one, we would focus purely on acceleration. And when I'm referring to acceleration here, is basically your first step, right? Going from either a jog or basically a standstill to immediately trying to get to maximum velocity as quickly as possible. So drills that I would do here would be ones that would ultimately teach the athlete to be able to get into that proper forward lean, that proper shin angle, and be able to apply force as quickly as you possibly can, the first few steps of accelerating when it comes to your actual speed. Now, ultimately, what we want to accelerate for is not only that first step to get to the ball quick, but if it's a longer run, we can get to our maximum velocity faster. And that would be what I would focus on as far as day 2. Where day 1's really more about technique, but also getting that faster first step. Day 2 is very technical in teaching the athlete how to properly cycle as far as their running form when they're in their top speed, right? So a lot of guys, whether it be something like the residual phase that we're working on, their front side or backside mechanics, this is when they're actually in their top speed motion, just cleaning that up. So a lot of technical drills, a lot of cycling drills, maybe some single leg high knees, things of that nature that are going to, again, perfect the technique as far as the maximum velocity that will translate over to the actual soccer field. Day 3, which I would consider the most important, would be change of direction and sport specific. Now, getting a little bit deeper into this, change of direction would be anything when it comes to agility, right? Because when we talk speed on the soccer field, a lot of that has to do with lateral change of direction. You're moving in multiple different directions, and you want to be able to produce force in different planes of motion at the drop of a dime. So when you think of acceleration, just more linear, change of direction is being able to produce that on a laterally. And the other thing is sport specific. A lot of times I don't try to add skill training when it comes to in the weight room, but I do want to break down components. Like I said, remember, isolate and elevate. So things that you'll see as far as running or speed related on a soccer field are things like arc running, right? Actual running like a half or quarter arc, a half arc, or maybe a figure 8 drill. If you actually break down a lot of what you're doing on the soccer field, it's more in a curve, right, or circles than it is actually very straight line. It can be, and that's what we kind of focus on, change of direction, but that's more of the sport specific stuff, the arc running. In addition to this, things as simple as, looking back running, right? Running in a straight line while looking back. People think like, oh, that's just something taken for granted. Well, yeah, we want to increase the maximum velocity up here, but we also want to teach the athlete to properly, or like I said, isolate and elevate the component of being able to look back while sprinting this way or at an angle, having that situational awareness, doing it where you are consciously doing it in training so that it unconsciously translates over to the field, right? Giving the athletes something to focus on when they're in their actual training that they're doing. And then day 4 finally is what is going to be plyometrics, or jump training, right? Plyometrics, where we're dealing with that stretch shortening cycle, really trying to maximize how we decelerate. Not only will this support the athlete in sprinting, it'll support them overall in their explosive capacity to kick, right? Teaching them how to properly decelerate, teaching them also how to be explosive. So if we can increase the amount of force absorbed and force output or production, all of these will essentially increase. So I would devote a full day to that actual jump training to overall increase the athlete's ability to be able to produce force and absorb it. So I hope that helps. This is kind of more or less an overview of how I will break it down: day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4. Depending on the athlete and how much volume I would have towards them. Let's say, for instance, if it's a brand new athlete, or I'm sorry, a very untrained athlete, only a couple years experience, I might weigh a little bit heavy on day 1, 2, 3, or then 4. If it's a more advanced athlete, if I had somebody who's kind of in a semi-pro manner, I'm going to focus a little bit more on sport specific. If I see a weakness in the acceleration max velocity, I might touch on that a little bit more, or emphasize that. Again, just depending on where the athlete is at is where I place the emphasis, because we always want to tackle the weakness to add that thing to their game, or that modality to their game for that next season. So I hope this helps. I'll catch you guys next time.